Do you want a bank that talks sustainable growth or walks it? The series is brought to you by Nedbank Corporate and Investment Banking.
With me now, Thiago Almeida, who is Sector Lead Power and Infrastructure at Nedbank Corporate and Investment Banking. Thiago, thanks very much for your time. Now, we're talking about distribution and grids and transmission lines when it comes to power. Often we get caught up in the power generation story, and we don't go into the transmission and distribution. It's a big arena, and there could potentially be a huge fallover if we don't pay attention.
Absolutely, Bronwyn. Thank you very much for the opportunity to talk to you today. We keep focusing on power generation, and it's definitely a significant challenge ahead of us, especially in the race to decarbonize our energy matrix. And we so dearly need that. But what we're seeing more and more is that we're unable to connect some of these magnificent energy generating projects to deliver electricity to where they need to be if we don't have investment on infrastructure. And this investment is both on the transmission grids, but also on the distribution grids, all the way down to household levels and to industrial consumers. So that's a key area of focus, and one that there's a phenomenal amount of investment to be done, and for the private sector to participate in there.
Is enough attention being paid today to distribution and transmission?
No, absolutely not. So there's an estimate by the International Energy Agency. We require about $40 billion per year for the next 5 years in investment in this space. And most of that is actually on transmission. So this is high lines, high voltage lines to get sometimes power across multiple borders. We're not giving enough attention to this. It's a problem that we've known that was around for many, many years now. We have the resources to do that. There's a framework, but we need better legislation. We need better integration between the various power pools in the continent. We need for public sector to work with private sector. We need DFIs to work with commercial banks in order to unlock this significant challenge.
Talk to me about the role of DFIs and other financial institutions in this space to catalyze the interest, to catalyze the execution when it comes to your distribution and transmission.
So that's a very good point, Bronwyn, because there is a space for everyone. DFI is especially important in the current scenario that we find many of our utilities. So over half of our utilities are very close to insolvency in the continent. So restructuring tariffs at a government level, associated with lending is very key. We need to be able to make sure that these utilities are able to recover their costs through adequate tariffs, through adequate mechanisms, so that their balance sheet is healthy enough that they can deploy projects and really improve the sector. So DFIs, I think, have a very important role in de-risking the sector.
You took the words right out of my mouth. It is about de-risking the sector.
It is about building capacity, de-risking, and getting the African utilities to where they should be, helping them to unbundle when that's necessary, and setting the road for private sector participation throughout the ecosystem.
Now, how is the attention going to move to transmission and distribution when there is such a dearth of power generation across the African continent that perhaps there isn't the bandwidth to even think about transmission and distribution?
So we have some cases, like, for example, Kenya, that has over 10% of its energy being generated from renewables. It almost has an energy surplus and is unable to sell the electricity to its neighbors because of the lack of transmission systems. We also have the growth of countries like Angola, for example, which in the SADC region has increased at about 10% per year the amount of energy that it generates. But it's starting to get to a point where it's not unable to deploy some of the electricity out into the system. It goes in hand. You can't consider one without considering the other one. But I also think we need to focus a lot on the distribution space. And that's very much associated to collection of revenue, to clients at the end that are paying for subsidies for tariffs, commercial, industrial clients. That also needs a lot of interest and investments.
Thiago, thank you so much for your time. I've been chatting to Thiago Almeida, who is the sector lead on infrastructure and power, Nedbank Corporate and Investment Banking.
Do you want a bank that talks sustainable growth or walks it? The series is brought to you by Nedbank Corporate and Investment Banking.